The router by itself has no monitor from which you can view and modify its configuration. There are two different methods for connecting to the router to modify its configuration. Make a direct connection with the router through its console port, or connect to the router through the network through a telnet session. To make a console connection, a terminal or PC running terminal emulation software is connected directly to the router. By default, your Cisco router is automatically configured to accept a console connection. However, you must have physical access to the router to make a console connection. To make a console connection in Windows, run the hyperterminal utility. If you cannot find it on your system, you might need to install it from the Windows installation disk. When hyperterminal starts, you will configure the connection for the router. Give it a name, select an icon if you wish, then click OK. To configure a direct connection through the COM port, select the appropriate COM port from the Connect Using drop-down list. Next, you are prompted for the port communication settings. Possible settings vary depending on the router type. In general, select 9600 bits per second and turn off flow control, except the remaining defaults. When you click OK, hyperterminal starts the connection with the router. Press Return to get things started. On a new system, no passwords have yet been set, and you will not be prompted for a password at login. When you're finished, close hyperterminal. Saving the hyperterminal session saves the connection parameters you supplied when hyperterminal started. In addition, it adds an icon to the hyperterminal folder from which you can quickly initiate a console session with the router. After you initially configure your router, you have the flexibility of using a direct console connection or a network connection for making router configuration changes. A network connection is referred to as a virtual terminal connection because it emulates a directly connected terminal through a network connection. With a virtual terminal connection, you can configure the router without having to be in the same physical location as the router. To make the connection, you must configure the router with an IP address, the virtual line must be configured, and the Enable Secret Password set. Windows comes with two utilities, Hyperterminal and Telnet, which you can use to make a virtual terminal connection with the router. To use Hyperterminal, run hyperterm.exe. In the New Connection dialog box, supply a session name and click OK. Next, select TCP IP WinSock from the Connect Using drop-down list. If this option does not appear in the list, you might need to reconfigure the PC or use another utility. Then type the IP address of the router and click OK. To start Telnet, you can either go to the DOS prompt or use the Run option from the Start menu. Type Telnet to launch the program. Next, select Remote System from the Connect menu. Type the router IP address and accept the defaults of Telnet as the port and VT100 as the terminal type. Click Connect to open the session with the router. A faster way to start the connection is to follow Telnet in the Run dialog box or DOS prompt with the router IP address. With the connection made, you will need to supply the VTY password if it has been configured. If you type 3 bad passwords in a row, the router breaks the connection. You can establish a virtual terminal connection with the router through a Windows PC using either Hyperterminal or Telnet. Before you can connect, however, the router must have one interface configured with an IP connection, and the Enable Secret Password must be set.